Ashana, Parak Beis, Mishnah Aleph. So let's just give some background. We're holding over here this Masechta, a large portion of the first few prakim are dealing with the mitzvah and the inyan of Kiddush HaChodesh and when to make sure that the Yom Tovim are going to fall out on time and how we take care of that. So, Im Einan Makirin Oisoi, Mishalchen Acher Imay Laha'idoi. Bez in Yerushalayim that declared Rosh Chodesh would not accept edus about the new moon from a witness unless they knew him to be trustworthy and fit to testify. Now it's interesting because L'maisa, when another person comes into Beis Din for, let's say, I don't know, the classic case, Reuven so Shimon being Michal, Reuven and Shimon see somebody being Michal Shabbos, don't want to say edus about that. So how does Beis Din know that they're trustworthy? So the question is, that's not the question because the Torah is mammon them. The Torah gives them an amonos. There's a lot of Torah on this, and in the Yeshivish Mesechtes, there's a lot of read on this. There's a famous vart from Baruch Ber about it, but let's not get carried away. The point is, this Mishnah discusses how Beis Din was able to verify the witnesses' eligibility, their kashrus, their namonos, if they didn't know him. If the judges in Yerushalayim didn't know him well enough to rely on his edus, the judges of the Beis Din in his hometown would send another pair of Eidim who are known to the judges in Yerushalayim with him to testify about him. But Rishayna, so the Mishnah is really coming to answer a question. The question is, do we find this by other types of Eidus as well, or this is something miyuchad for Eidus HaChodesh? So the Mishnah explains, originally they would accept testimony about the new moon from anybody, because all Yidden are assumed to be trustworthy and fit to testify, unless there's evidence to the contrary, innocent until proven guilty. However, after the heretics, the Baisusim or the Kusim, were heretics like the Tzedukim, they claimed loyalty only to Torah Shabbat and weren't goyrus anything but Torah Shabbat. They said it was made up. So they were very busy disrupting the process of declaring Rosh Chodesh by hiring Eidim to testify falsely about the new moon. So the Chachamim were masakin that the Dayanim may accept testimony, Eidus, only from those that are known to be eligible. Similarly, like we mentioned in the previous parak about the Beis Din Shel Kohanim, that would verify a person's yichus. So over here we're not verifying the person's yichus, but over here we have to verify, is this person legitimate? Is this person kasherly edus b'chlal? Mishnah Beis. We learned in Parak Aleph Mishnah Gimel that shluchim were sent out by Beis Din to inform distant communities which they had been declared as Rosh Chodesh. However, this was not the original method of publicizing Beis Din's decision. The following three Mishnayos describe the original method. Originally, there were people appointed by the Beis Din to light a relay, and we'll explain what we mean by relay of torches across a range of mountaintops to inform the distant communities when Rosh Chodesh had been declared. This procedure, which is described in the next two Mishnayos, saved the Beis Din from the expense of hiring messengers to travel with the news to the diaspora. Just add another thing to your Yom Tov expenses. If the Beis Din declared the 30th day to be Rosh Chodesh, they would signal with torches that night, immediately after Rosh Chodesh, to spread the word. The torches were used only at night, when their light would be seen from far away. If they did not declare the 30th day to be Rosh Chodesh, in which case it was automatically deferred to the next day, the 31st day, they would not signal with torches at any time. The people would realize from the absence of the torches that Rosh Chodesh would be on the 31st day. However, after the Kusim disrupted the process by lighting torches on the wrong night, who were the Kusim? They were a group that converted to Yiddishkeit, but the legitimacy of their conversion, of their gerus, is a machlekes tanoim. The machlekes, if they're gerei emes or gerei arayis, we discussed this in our shiur b'chelak. We gave the whole story, the whole background about it. It's always, it always comes up. We'll always say some more inyanim about it. And they acted with great hostility towards the regular mainstream from Tzibur at that time. This is nothing new, what we're seeing today. So his skinushi shluchin yotzim. It once happened when the Beis Din didn't determine the 30th day to be Rosh Chodesh and didn't use the torches, the Kusim shown their torches to trick the people into thinking that the 30th day was indeed Rosh Chodesh. So his skinushi shluchin yotzim, so the Chacham were masakin, the messengers should go out to announce that Rosh Chodesh had been declared. The messengers usually carried a document from Beis Din that was recognized by the Jews in the distant communities to be authentic. As I stated in Meiri, because otherwise, the same way they could catch on to the Indian of to the idea of the torches, they could also catch on to fabricate a document saying, like just like the shluchim and make up some baba ma'isa, but they had a mahalach how to identify that it was kosher, that this was the real deal. Mishnah Gimel, Ketzar Hay Masin Masuais. How would they do this relay of torches? Mevin Klunsoy Shel Erez Aruchin. They would bring long poles of cedar wood. Cedar wood was used because it doesn't burn up quickly. They could be raised high and seen from far away. V'kanim v'atzis shemen u'na'eresh shel pishton. Reeds, balsam wood, and flax combings to be used as fuel for the fire. V'kerich b'mashicha would wrap them together with a string. V'oil l'reish shahar, and they would go up to the top of the mountain. U'matzis behenna sa'ur, and light them with the flame. U'moiluch u'meivi u'mailu u'moirid. They would wave the torch back and forth, up and down, in order that the person on the next mountaintop will not mistake the waving torch for a shooting star, which moves either horizontally or vertically, but not both. They wave the torch in both ways. Until he saw his friend on the second mountaintop doing the same thing. And then the person on the second mountaintop waved his torch until he saw a person on the third mountaintop doing the same thing. And this process continued from one mountaintop to the next. The cheshbon was like this. The way it works was, it's not that like random nights, okay, let's make bonfires on mountains and start waving around torches. That's not the idea. They knew Baruch when Rosh Chodesh was, and once they started, there was a certain trajectory, there was a certain seder in how these masuets would work. So once you had the seder for it to work, so then that's how they would start in a specific place, as the Mishnah will explain. Mishnah Daled. From which mountains would they send signals by lighting torches? Mehar Hamishcha l'Sarteva, Umisarteva l'Grefina, Umigrefina l'Chavran, Mechavran l'Beis Biltin, Umibeis Biltin l'Zozu Misham. They were signaled from the mountain of oil, Har Hamishcha, Har Hazesim, which is just east of Yerushalayim, to Sarteva, from Sarteva to Grefina, from Grefina to Chavran, from Chavran to Beis Biltin. Torches were lit on other mountains as well, the Gemara says. The Mishnah named only the major mountains along the route. And the Beis Biltin is within sight of Pumbedisa, which is a town on the border of Bavel. Beis Biltin lezazu misham. And when signaling from Beis Biltin, they wouldn't move from their place. But the signaler would continue to wave the torch back and forth and up and down till the people of Pumbedisa responded by going up to the rooftops and waving their own torches, and he would see that the entire diaspora lit before him like a bonfire. And it was a gewaldige Sache. Mastama was very exciting. Mastama was a very, people had a big geschmack, The kids wanted to go with their tatis to the top of the mountains late at night to start waving the torches. Two things, three things. It was at night. It was with the torches, with fire. It was going on a hike up a mountain with their father. It was a geschmacka thing. Yeah, I don't know. We don't have this today. We should institute a new tikkunim, a new segula with this, a new something with this. But it would be a lot of fun. Mishnah Hey. There was a large courtyard in Yerushalayim, and it was called Beis Yazek. What's this for? What are we talking about? The Mishnah relates what happened to the Edom who saw the new moon once they arrived in Yerushalayim. This courtyard is where all the witnesses gathered and where the Bezdin questioned them. This is where the courthouse was. It wasn't a typical courthouse like today, but there was cholent, and there was kugel, and there was herring, and there was sushi, and there was pizza, and there was all kinds of gittazachen to eat. Large feasts were made for them so that people would be encouraged to come regularly to testify about the new moon. To get to Yerushalayim, a witness would often have to go outside the tchum, which is more than 2,000 amos from his place of residence. And as we spoke previously, it's also on Shabbos and Yom Tov to go more than 2,000 amos from where one was residing when Shabbos began. This limit is called the Tchum Shabbos, or just the Tchum. If someone leaves the Tchum on Shabbos, he must remain where he is for the rest of the day. He may go no more than 4 amos in each direction. The Mishnah discusses how this halacha affected witnesses who came to testify about the new moon on Shabbos. They were allowed to leave their Tchum on the way to Yerushalayim because breaking the Hilchas Shabbos is permitted for the sake of testifying about the new moon. However, they're allowed to go home. So, originally they would have moved from the courtyard of Beis Yazek for the entire day, so as not to be mechalal Shabbos by being mechalal the Isser of Tchumen. The entire courtyard of Beis Yazek, which was enclosed by walls, was considered the equivalent of a person's Daled Amos, so they could go anywhere within the Chatzar but not outside it. The Mishnah refers to the time after the Greeks had breached the wall of Yerushalayim to the point that the city itself was no longer enclosed, because Yerushalayim, it says, El Malachim Meselin in Aleis Balayla. The Gemara in Eruvin constantly refers to Yerushalayim as being a city that the doors close at night. So his skin Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken Sheyu Mahalchan Alpaim Am Lecharuach. However, Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken decreed that they should be considered like people who were in the courtyard of Beis Hazek when Shabbos began, and they may go 2,000 amos from the city of Yerushalayim in every direction. Rabbi Gamliel made this takana so that Edom wouldn't be discouraged from coming again in the future. If they're stuck in these dalar amas, it's not going to be geshmak for them. They're stuck eating chalent. They're stuck with this sudas gedailos the whole Shabbos. It's very not geshmak. They need a break. They need to walk around after the suda. They can't walk with the dalar amas. The Gemara says that after a meal you should walk 40 amas, either 10 amas 4 times or 4 amas 10 times. That's already out of the dalar amas of the tchum that if you're stuck within the tchum, you're allowed to walk. So what do? So that's Rabbi Gamliel was masakin. Since the Isur Tchumen is merely a Isur D'Rabbanan, Rabbi Gamliel and his Bezdin were authorized to override it for this purpose. And this halacha applies not only to these witnesses who go outside the tchum to testify about the new moon, but also a midwife who goes outside her tchum to deliver a baby, and to one who goes outside his tchum to save people from a fire, from an army that's attacking, or a flooding river, or from a collapsed building. They too are considered like the residents of the town to which they came, and have the permission to go 2,000 amos from the town in every direction. Since a midwife and a rescuer are allowed, and even obligated to desecrate Shabbos by leaving their tchum, or even doing malacha, for the sake of saving life, they are granted the right to go anywhere in the town, 2,000 amos beyond it, even for purposes unrelated to saving a life. Mishnah Vav. How did the judges examine the witnesses? First come, first serve. The pair of witnesses that arrives first is examined first. The judge is bringing the older one of the Edom, separating him from his partner, and they say to him, the witnesses are questioned separately, as in all cases of Eidos, to prevent one from copying the answers of the other. The older witness is privileged to testify first out of respect for his age. They state in the Mishnah and Sanhedrin. So Emar, Ketzar Visas Halavana, tell us how you saw the new moon. Motivational interviewing, open-ended questions. Was the only part of the moon turned towards the sun or away from the sun? Was the moon on the northern side of the sky or on the southern side of the sky? How high was the moon from the horizon? Which way was the lit crescent of the moon pointing, to the north or to the south? How wide was the crescent? So let's go through each one of these things. Tell us how you saw the new moon. Was the only part of the moon turned towards the sun or away from the sun? Since the moon reflects the light of the sun, the lit part of the moon, the crescent, is always nearer the sun, and the unlit part is always further away from the sun. Therefore, if the witness says that the unlit part was nearer than this was closer to the sun, the judges know that he's saying a baba maisa, or he made a mistake. And then we have, let's find a ledrema. Is the moon on the northern side of the sky or the southern side of the sky? Close to sunset, the new moon always appears above the western horizon, but it may be either on the southern side of the sky or the northern side. On the basis of astronomical calculations, the court knew on which side it should appear at that time of the year. If the witness's statements do not match the court's calculation, the testimony is rejected. Kamahoyu Gavaya, how high was the moon from the horizon? The witness is asked how high the moon appeared above the horizon. For example, whether it seemed as high as a building at a certain distance from the witness, of 2 stories or 3 stories, and they had ways of showing them, what it was exactly. Which way was it pointing, to the north or to the south? The Bezdin would ask whether the horns, meaning the tips of the crescent, were pointing north or south. When the new moon appears to the left of the sun, its horns point south, and when it appears to the right of the sun, the horns point north. How wide was it? The witness is asked to estimate the width of the crescent, which is very narrow at the beginning of the month and gets wider as the month progresses. For example, they ask him whether the crescent appeared as wide as a barley corn held a certain distance away to 2 barley corns. They had a cheshbainis. They had mahalachim, how to understand and how to answer all these questions. If the aide said that the moon's unlit part was turned towards the sun, he said nothing. His answer is false, and his testimony is rejected. In fact, if he answered any of the questions incorrectly, his testimony is not good. The Mishnah specifies this answer that the only part of the moon facing the sun, because that's always wrong. Whereas the correct answer to the other questions depends on the time of year and other cheshbenos. After they examine the first witness, they bring in the second witness and examine him and ask him the same exact questions that they asked the first one. If the words are consistent, there are no serious contradictions between the two witnesses, the testimony is valid. The judges then ask all the other pairs of Edom about the main points of the testimony without going into detail. This is done not because they're needed for the testimony of the first pair of Edom has already been accepted, but only so they'll not leave disheartened, so they'll not testify before the judges, to prevent them from feeling that their journey had been wasted. The witnesses are asked to give some testimony so that they'll be encouraged to come regularly to testify about the new moon in the future. It's a famous story, which is to bring out the sensitivity that Chazal had. There's a famous story of Yitzchak Elchanan, a specter, the Rav of Kavna, famous Kavna Rav, was tried very hard to get somebody exempted from serving in the Russian army, and he was matzliach. So Ruvain comes, knocks on the door, and says, "Rebbe, you heard Ruvain Shrif in the army? Mazel tov, Baruch Hashem, very exciting, Baruch Hashem, shkoich for the good Psura." 5 minutes later, somebody else knocks on the door. Shimon knocks on the door and says, "Rebbe, it's the Geheret." He was freed from the army. Every time he answered the same excitement as one before. Why? So these people, they felt like they were doing something. He made each person feel chashuv. It's our obligation to do this to the people around us. Whether it's a little kid telling a parent a joke, the parent knows the joke, the parent doesn't even find the joke funny. Validate what the other person is saying, make them feel good, make them feel important, make them feel chashuv. Okay, ad kan my speech. Mishnah Zayin. The Mishnah describes how the Bezdin, after accepting the edus of the witnesses, declares the day to be Rosh Chodesh. The head of the Bezdin says, Mekudesh, it is Kadosh. And all the people who are present respond after him, Mekudesh, Mekudesh, it is sanctified, it is sanctified. In Torah state, Vayidaber Moshe es Moed Hashem el Bnei Yisrael. Moshe declared the festivals of Hashem to the children of Yisrael. By naming Moshe, who led the Bezdin at that time, the pasuk teaches that the declaration should be made by the head of the Bezdin. Pasuk Beis over there says, Moed Hashem asher tikru oisem mikrei kodesh, which can be read as Moed Hashem asher tikru atem mikrei kodesh. The festivals of Hashem that you Bnei Yisrael shall declare declarations of mikrei kodesh, indicating that the people too should declare it as kodesh. It is used in the plural form, mikrei kodesh, declarations of kedusha, to instruct the people to declare it mekudesh twice. The Mishnah brings a machlekes about whether this declaration is made only when Rosh Chodesh falls on the 30th day, or even when it falls out on the 31st day. Whether the new moon was seen in its time, meaning the night that starts the 30th day, the Mishnah refers to the 30th day as its time, because the moon cycle, again, is about 29 and a half days long, making it natural for the new month to begin on the 30th day. In fact, the new month should almost always begin at some point in the 30th day. The reason it doesn't is that a month must consist of full days and not fractions of days, as we mentioned in the Akdama to the Mesichta. In which case, the 30th day is Rosh Chodesh, and whether it was not seen in its time. It was seen either on the night that starts the 31st day, or it was not seen at all. In which case, the 31st day is Rosh Chodesh. Mekatchen, I say, the Mekadesh the Chodesh with the declaration mentioned above in the Mishnah. However, Elazar Reb Tzadok says, "Im loiner bismanoi ein mekatchen oisai," if it was not seen in its time. In which case, the 31st day is Rosh Chodesh. They do not need to be mekadesh it at all. Shekvar kitru shemayim, because heaven has already sanctified it. The 31st day becomes Rosh Chodesh automatically, without a declaration by the Bezdin. According to Elazar Reb Tzadok, the Bezdin is never obligated to be mekadesh the Chodesh with the declaration, even on the 30th day. They do so only to reinforce the decision. Therefore, when the 31st day is Rosh Chodesh, a declaration is not needed at all, since it becomes Rosh Chodesh automatically without a decision on their part. Okay, Mishnah Ches. It's an interesting story over here. We learned in Mishnah Vav that Bezdin would ask the Edom a number of questions. This Mishnah describes Ram Gamliel, who was the head of the Bezdin, would examine witnesses who were too simple to understand the questions. Ram Gamliel had forms of different shapes of the moon on the table and on the wall in his attic, where he examined the witnesses. I don't know if this was in Beis Yazek, but Ram Gamliel was made a takana about that over there, so maybe this is part of his, he had some kind of attic over there. He would show to the simple people who couldn't understand the usual questions and pointing to different forms. He would ask them, did you see the moon like this, or did you see the moon like that? Again, we see the sensitivity of Chazal over here. It's a tremendous idea. A person doesn't know anything. Why is he coming to say this if he doesn't know what he's talking about? You always wonder. People show up to give a shiur. People show up with a Shabbat Baruch to give a speech. They don't know what they're talking about. They're not prepared. Why bother? Be sensitive to these people also. Whatever it is, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what's going on with them. Over here, it's clear. Gamliel would spend time. Gamliel was busy making cheshbainis of figuring out the Mailad Halavona, but at the same time, as he's doing that, and he's trying to be Mekadosh and Chaydash, he's busy helping simple Yid and simple people. It's many people think it's beneath their dignity to have to explain things to people in a very simple way. And it's a very big mistake to be doicha somebody who doesn't understand something. Answer them pleasantly, like we said before. Talk to them pleasantly. Validate their questions, validate their concerns. It's very hurtful. Imagine you had a question that you thought was a very good question, whether a question in learning, a question on Hashkafa. You go ask a Rebbe, you go ask a Rav, you go ask a parent, and the person that you ask says, it's not important, it's not a question. It may be a very simple question. It may have a very simple answer. It may be a nonsensical question. It may be an unimportant question. To that person, it's important. Be patient with them. Be patient with them. So Shabahen Mara said, did you see it like this, or like that? It happened once a pair of Edom came and said, we saw the old moon in the morning in the east and the new moon in the evening of that same day in the west. At the end of the cycle, the moon appears in the east in the early morning, and at the beginning of a cycle, it appears in the west in the early evening. Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri said, they're false witnesses, because it's impossible to see both the old moon and the new moon on the same day. There's always at least 24 hours between the last appearance of the old moon and the first appearance of the new moon. During those 24 hours, the moon cannot be seen at all. So witnesses who claim to have seen both the old and the new moon the same day must be lying. But when they came to the Bezdin in Yavne, Ram Gamliel accepted them as reliable witnesses. The Gemara tells us what was going on in Yavne. Yavne was one of the places, it constantly comes up in the Gemara, the Yavne, the Chacham ben Yavne. Mr. Hashem will get to discuss it in a proper shiur, but Yavne, the Gemara over here says, was one of the places, was one of the stops that Sanhedrin made in the Golus. Ram Gamliel accepted them as reliable witnesses. He asserted that what they said about the new moon is true, and what they said about the old moon is false. Ram Gamliel accepted their edus regarding the new moon because that agreed with his astronomical calculations. As for their edus regarding the old moon, Ram Gamliel simply dismissed it, believing that they mistook a wisp of a cloud for the moon. Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, on the other hand, ruled. So, what's the machlekes Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri and Gamliel over here? Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri says we're going to chop out what they said about the new moon. What they said about the old moon, that's correct. Or we're going to take that part of the edus. We're going to take their edus about what they said about the new moon. Half of what they said is true, half of what they said is not true. So which half are we going to take, which half are we not going to take? So Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, on the other hand, ruled that their edus about the new moon was sheker, because according to his calculations, it should not have been visible that evening. So it wasn't just like that. It was a machlekes about what the calculations of the moon were. Another occasion, a pair of Edom came and said, we saw the new moon in its time. But on the night of the month's fullness, the next night, which starts the 31st day, it was not visible. This seems very unlikely, because if the moon was large enough to be visible on the first night, it should certainly have been visible on the second night, right? Because on the second night it gets bigger, not smaller. The Kibler Ram Gamliel. And yet Ram Gamliel accepted them as reliable Edom. Here too, Ram Gamliel accepted that they saw the moon on the first night because they agreed with his calculation. He dismissed their statement about the moon being invisible the following night because it might have been hidden by a cloud or was invisible for some other reason. Based on their testimony, he decided that the 30th day was Rosh Chodesh. It's half of a fella if you think about this. Why? Because what we're doing by making Rosh Chodesh, we're making Yom Tovim. We're making, based on these cheshbainos of these people that came and they said Hakazera is Kazeh, and then Gamliel says it's like this and it's like that, and Gamliel is makabel the edus. That means that he's saying that, let's say this is talking about Rosh Chodesh Nisan. In 2 weeks from now it's going to be Pesach, And you're going to punish somebody who eats chametz based on these edim. You're going to, or it's going to be Yom Kippur, as we'll see in the next Mishnah. We'll leave it. We'll explain the rest of the rest will be self-explanatory in the next Mishnah itself. Rabbi Daisa ben Harkinas. Rabbi Daisa ben Harkinas said, "Eidei sheker, and they're false witnesses. How can one testify that a woman gave birth and the next day she's still pregnant? Her belly is between her teeth. This is impossible. Likewise, in our case, it's impossible for the new moon to appear one night and then disappear the next night. What are you talking about?" Amalei Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua said to him, "Raya ani es dvarecha. I see the truth in your words. According to these chachamim, the Edom were false, and the testimony cannot be accepted to have the 30th day declared as Rosh Chodesh. Thus they ruled contrary to Rabbi Gamliel, and Rosh Chodesh did not fall until the 31st day." Yes, we have a very big problem. Rabbi Gamliel says Rosh Chodesh is day 30, meaning that 2 weeks from now is going to be Pesach. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Daisa are going to say tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. So 2 weeks from tomorrow is going to be Pesach. When do you burn the chametz? When do you make a seder? When do you eat matzah? Now you'll tell me, what do you mean? 2 days? No 2 days. We're talking about Eretz Yisrael. We're not talking about Chutz La'aretz. The whole svara of why in Chutz La'aretz they have 2 days is al Tzveika D'Yoma. But here this is Eretz Yisrael. So the Tzveika D'Yoma moved from the diaspora into Eretz Yisrael. What's going on? So this is going to be discussed in the next Mishnah, Mishnah Tes, which is the final Mishnah of our parak. The incident recorded at the end of the previous Mishnah took place at the beginning of the month of Tishrei. According to Yeshua, meaning it's worse than Pesach, was Tishrei. The Yom Tovim of that Tishrei, including Ram Gamliel, occurred 1 day later than Ram Gamliel determined. Ram Gamliel, who was the Nasi, meaning he was the head of the Bezdin, he wanted to avoid a machlekes in Klal Yisrael, which would have some people observing Yom Kippur on the official date and others observing it the next day. Therefore, Gamliel insisted that Rabbi Yeshua publicly submit to the court's ruling, meaning because he was the Nasi, Rabbi Yeshua was talking to the Av Bezdin, as you know from the Gemara Brachos and Daf Chav Ches. And there were 3 stories in the Gemara. The Gemara mentions that there were 3 stories where Gamliel, I shouldn't say they were all involving Gamliel. There's a Gemara B'chayres, there's a Gemara Hayrias, and there's a Gemara Brachos, and there's a Gemara Roshana. There are 4 stories about overthrowing or people asserting their power that others should be machnia in an interesting way to avoid machlekes, to make machlekes, to avoid, for the most part, to avoid machlekes, but we'll see what happened. So let's see the story. Shalach Leim Gamliel sent Rabbi Yeshua the following message. I decree that you come before me with your walking stick and your money and Yom Kippur as it falls out according to your cheshbon. Rabbi Gamliel ordered Rabbi Yeshua to treat that day as a regular weekday by appearing before him with his walking stick and money, publicly showing his submission to the Bezdin. Although Rabbi Daisa ben Harkinas had also challenged Rabbi Gamliel's position, Rabbi Gamliel sent his order only to Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel's reason for this was that Rabbi Yeshua was the Av Bezdin, who was second to Rabbi Gamliel himself, so there was real concern that people would follow him. Rabbi Kiva went and found Rabbi Yeshua troubled over having been ordered by the Nasi to be Mechal Yom Kippur on his cheshbon. Rabbi Kiva said to him, I can derive from the Torah that whatever Gamliel did is done. Meaning whatever he paskins, you got to follow him. The Bezdin's decision regarding the date of Rosh Chodesh is halachically binding, even if it's a mistake. Why? Shenema, the pasuk says, Ela Mayadei Hashem Ekroi Kodesh. It says in the pasuk, these are the Mayadim of Hashem, Asher Tikroisim, which you shall declare, Bein Bizmanon, Bein Shalei Bizmanon, Ainli Ela Mayadois Ela Elu. By saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yamim Tovim depend on what you shall declare, the pasuk indicates that regardless of whether the Bezdin declares the Yamim Tovim the correct time or not the correct time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I have no other Yamim Tovim than these, meaning it's totally what you do it. The Hainu, in a certain sense, if in the middle of Teves, Bezdin decides, obviously this is a crazy example, in the middle of Teves, Bezdin decides, we're having Shavuos now, we made a toast in the Cheshbon, Shavuos has to be now, but being that's what Bezdin said, it's totally in the Kriyas Bezdin. So that's what you got to do. That's what Rabbi Kiva says. Bole Eitzel B'Daisa ben Harkinis. Rabbi Shua went to B'Daisa ben Harkinis, who agreed with him. Initially, took the same position as he did. B'Daisa ben Harkinis said to him, "Im ba'im anu lodon acher bezdina shel Rabbi Gamliel." If we're going to challenge the court of Rabbi Gamliel, shrichen anu lodon acher kol bezdin bezdin shel Amid Mimos Moshe v'Achshav. We'll have to challenge every bezdin that stood from the days of Moshe Rabbeinu until now. Why? Shenema vayal Moshe v'Aaron Nadav Avihu v'Shivim Ziknei Yisrael. Because the pasuk says Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 Zikanim went up. Why were the names of the 70 Zikanim who were Dayanim and the Bezdin of Moshe not mentioned? Elul Lamed, Shakol Shloisha Ushloisha, Shamdu Bezdin al Yisrael, Hareu Bezdin Shal Moshe. This is only to teach us that every Bezdin of 3 Dayanim that was appointed as a Bezdin in Klal Yisrael is like the court of Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore what? What's the point? What's this drasha that he's telling him? If someone claims that the Dayanim of his generation are not as great as Moshe and Aaron, we can say to him that although that may be true, they might be as great as the other judges of Moshe's court, whose names are not mentioned. Since we don't know who they are, we don't know their greatness and their excellence. So by omitting their names, the Torah warns us against assuming that our judges are inferior to them. It's a gewaltige chiddush, but this is something that we have to apply to even Bisman Hazeh. Let's talk L'mashal. After Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, Yeshua ben Nun takes over, right? The Gemara says, "Pnei Moshe k'pnei Chama, pnei Yeshua k'pnei Lefana." Chacham Shlei Sedar Amru Oyla Isa Busha Oyla Isa Klima. They said, "Whoa." The Pashtus reading the Gemara is like this. They said, "Moshe Rabbeinu, what a lichtige leader, what a lichtige navi. He was as lichtig as the sun. He was as bright as the sun." Yeshua, no, he was Mekabel from Moshe, right? Yeah, obviously, we talk about this by Riches in our shur. We spoke about this by Riches in our shur Manavi. But the Mefarshim speak out over there that it was Dafka the Chachmei Oisei Hadar that were the first ones to be Mechaniyah themselves to Yeshua ben Nun. Why? First of all, because they had a tzivui from Moshe Rabbeinu to do so. Pasuk says Beferish and Parshas Pinchas and Parshas Vayelech that Moshe appointed Yeshua B'chayav to be the one to take over. So it doesn't matter. You could be greater than him. Chances are you weren't, but you could be greater than him, but it's just too bad. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu said, that's what you're mechuyev to do. Right? So there's no makom to be mefaklik about who these kingdom were and what they did. So what's the story? What happened over here? He took his walking stick and the money in his hand and went to Yavne, which was the seat of the Sanhedrin at that time, Rabbi Gamliel, on the day that Yom Kippur fell according to his cheshbon. Rabbi Gamliel stood up and kissed him on his head. He said to him, "Boi b'shalom Rebbe v'talmidi." Come in peace, my teacher and my student. Rebbe b'chachma v'talmidai shekibalta es devarai. You are my teacher in matters of wisdom, but you are also my student because you accepted my words. What does it mean that he says Rebbe v'talmidi? I think in Pashat Avart. I don't know if this is correct, but this is what I'm thinking. It's more of a hergish maybe. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I guess you could let me know. Why is he saying Rebbe v'talmidi? So he says, Rebbe b'chachma, you're my Rebbe in chachma. What sort of chachma is this? Rabbi Gamliel is not made the term Rebbe Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel wants Rebbe Yeshua to be masking to him, and then Rebbe Yeshua is masking to him. So what's he talking about? What's Rebbe b'chachma? What does he mean by that? He says, Rebbe b'chachma v'talmid shekibalta as devara. You're my Rebbe in chachma. Because I am the highest. The person who's in the highest position doesn't have the achelis to be machiniyah himself to somebody that's lower than him. In a certain sense. So that's Rebbe b'chachma. That's the chachma. It takes chachma for somebody who's second in command to be machniyah and that to be machniyah this much to the greatest person. But that's what I think. Talmidei shekibalta es devara, and you're my talmid because you accepted my words. Ad kan hamais over here.